can you tell us about your background with classical music? I just want to hear all of it because I've seen you have such a passion and love for classical music, for listening, for teaching, for understanding the history behind it. So share with us what inspired you to, I guess, or what gave you this love for classical music from a young age.
Sure, yeah. So I started piano lessons when I was five, six-ish. Just through taking piano, of course, a lot of piano teachers introduce their piano students to classical music. So from a young age, I was, learning classical music. But I owe the bulk of my love for classical music to my parents and the home environment that I grew up in. My parents really, really emphasized art, music, good books. Like, we had a huge record collection, huge CD collection. We went to the symphony all the time, the ballet, the opera.
Oh,
My
that's
mom
awesome.
was a ballet dancer, so she brought her love of, ballet into the family. And then my dad, he comes from a family that all took classical music, and we inherited a grand Steinway from his family. So it was just very much a part of our family culture. And so I sensed that as a child, and it stuck with me. Um, we grew up with a lot of music genres, and I like to emphasize that I'm not just a classical music lover. I love a lot of genres. I like to say I like great music. But I will say that out of all the genres that I was exposed to as a child, classical has definitely had the most profound impact on me. And it's really, like, it sounds maybe a little cheesy, but it just totally has changed and influenced my outlook of the world and the way I see, like, humanity, the depth of the human heart, all of that. Like, it's just,
Yes.
I know that I owe a lot of that to classical. So yeah, that's why I do what I do. I try to spread the word.
I love hearing that your parents brought that into your home. And unfortunately, in today's world, it's hard to find a household that really loves and encourages their kids to listen to classical music or brings it into the home. You know, you said something that I think is really amazing. You said that it's impacted how you view the world and has changed your perspectives. What are some of the benefits that you've seen in your life? And I don't even know if you can differentiate, right? Because you've never been without it. But what do you feel like um, it's given you as far as perspective or just gratitude or history? What are some of those things? I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it is really hard to separate because it's been with me since day one. But I mean, it's beautiful. It's very powerful. I think because it's fully notated, there's a huge capacity for creating I like to call it like a cathedral of sound, like just a majestic masterpiece. Like, I listen to music throughout my day quite often, and there are many times a day where I don't choose classical. It's often during those times of day where
Mm,
I need music for a specific purpose. So it's like, I'm stressed out, I'm gonna listen to some cool jams, or like, I need to relax, I'm gonna put on some harp music. I'm gonna go to church, I'm gonna put on this hymn. Like, there's very specific purposes for music, but I think that what classical has offered me is music as art. So sometimes I don't even know what I need in the moment, and then I turn on classical and I realize, whoa, I just had an experience. I didn't realize I needed to revisit that memory and process it. Or um,
yes.
yeah, it can be like a powerful space for catharsis and self-reflection. And I think especially today, when we're just given, everything already created for us, like, it's just like we live in an era of consumption, and it's so important to have those art forms that don't fill in all the gaps for us. Like a beautiful work of fiction, you have to imagine the rest of the details in your head. I think classical music is really similar, actually, to an amazing piece of fiction in that way, because it doesn't give us all the missing
Right.
pieces. It doesn't usually assign a particular script. I mean, you of course have certain pieces like the Nutcracker that do, but the bulk of classical music doesn't come with even sometimes a title. It's called Symphony Number One, Symphony Number Two, and I think that's really beautiful because it becomes something different in the minds of every single listener. For me, just I'll be maybe experiencing, a moment of darkness. And then I just remember this beautiful symphony. And I know that if it's possible to bring all those instruments together and to create order out of chaos, and for a composer to imagine that great piece of art, then there's so much goodness in the world and life is okay.
Yes. I think about my own experience with classical music as well, and for me a lot of it came from understanding the composers and perhaps what they were going through in their life or where they were raised, whether it was Germany or England or France or where they came from and their history and what encouraged them or the trials in their life that caused this work of art. And then studying a lot of piano music, and once you know the composer, like I love Chopin, and once you know his life a little bit more, or Schubert, I mean, there's so much more depth to learning their work when you understand who wrote it. And you mentioned that you have a degree in history. So how did that history degree help you even more dive into the history of music as well?
Yeah, I'm actually so grateful for that detour because I definitely went about my music career in a roundabout way. I considered going to conservatory. I got into a conservatory and then decided on the liberal arts instead, which was really great because I did my music at the same time. I got a minor in music and a major in history. But yeah, I would say from an early age, I've always been fascinated. And again, I owe this to my home environment too, with so many good books lying around and artwork lying around and history and all of that. I've always been really fascinated by seeing the parallels between all the different art forms and the reflections of what's happening within history in the music. Like, and I try to bring that into music lessons too. But just playing, Debussy, you can hear the artwork in his music. I love looking at not only the history, but like the gardens of the time, the styles of the time, the mannerisms, the philosophy, all of that. It's just you learn to connect the dots, and then yeah, and that's another reason why classical music is so important. It's bringing us different eras right here, and we can experience it now. So you enter into historical time periods, different eras. You experience tragedies from a different era, but then also like the resilience of humanity amidst those tragedies. Like composers like Shostakovich and Holocaust survivor composers, people like that.
Yes, it just adds depth. It adds depth and meaning, especially when accompanied by world music, music of the world. I mean, the study of music is the study of history, and I love that so much. I had a call months ago with someone who teaches world music, and he knows like the music of every single country and culture, and
Oh
he
wow.
teaches that. And I just thought, gosh, that would be such a fun thing to study as well. I had like one class on world music in college, and I thought there's so
Yeah.
much. We're never done learning or understanding music, why it's written, who it's written by, what can be done with it. And another thought I had was I firmly believe in bringing music into our homes that are uplifting, that encourage us to be kind, be thoughtful, be considerate, be compassionate, versus music that is heavy or has rhythms or language that bring negativity or that feel just hard. And I've since a young age have felt that way about media and music, and I hope to give that to my kids as well. But what's hard is what the world is giving us. You turn on a radio, you turn on Netflix, you turn on a movie. Well, some movies obviously have amazing soundtracks. I'm more thinking about the pop culture, and pop music is fun. That's what teenagers are usually drawn to, and what even my 4-year-old is drawn to. Like, she wants to play, she wants to play a lot of pop music, which we let her sometimes, but I'm trying to find
Yeah.
ways to help her see the goodness that comes from classical music. So one thing we've done is like the William Tell Overture. That's our cleanup song. We turn that on when we're cleaning up the house because it's like fast and exciting.
Yeah.
We listen to the Nutcracker a lot. Like Claire de Lune is a very lyrical one. They love pretending to be ballerinas, but I want to shift into you telling us about how you've made it your mission to bring classical music into the everyday home. Maybe it's even a home where there's not any musicians, but it's a home where every home should be filled with good music that encourage our kids to be good and to
Yeah.
enjoy the richness of classical music. So tell us about, first of all, why have you made this your mission, and how are you going about that?
Yeah, no, it's so challenging because everything you said, I'm not a mom actually, so I don't have, hands-on in the home experience, but I am a teacher, of course, to many kids, and I have lots of nieces and nephews, and I see the ramifications of just so much media screen time. And I think that's ultimately what it all comes back to. I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother
It is.
topic, but yeah, I mean, why is it important was the question, I believe, and then how am I doing it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, back to kind of what I was saying before. I think, kids are suffering the ramifications more than anyone of this time period with so much digitalization of everything and this alternative reality. I'm not saying video games are bad, but back to what I was saying earlier about just being fed completed images, they don't really have as many outlets for creativity. So they're born naturally creative. Like we are all born natural artists. And then I feel like, especially right now, that's kind of, squelched over time through just instant gratification. So, I mean, of course, the child is going to want to turn on. I actually like Taylor Swift, but I'm just going to use her as an option, as a, So I think she's really fun. But of course, they're going to maybe want to listen to people like that and other pop artists versus, a classical piece that takes just a little bit more work because you have to you
Yeah.
have to engage and you have to participate. So it's going to be a struggle at first, probably with most kids, and they might even say it's boring, they hate it, like who knows. But I just firmly believe that the payoff is so great and that it will have an effect on them, whether or not they realize it in the moment. I think like disengaging from screens, blasting that beautiful piece of music, and just giving them like a piece of paper, draw what you hear,
Yes.
write down what you hear. It's going to be so helpful for them to like process emotions that they don't even know how to articulate yet. As you said, like cultivate virtue in the home, like a good behavior. Like they hear that intuitively in the music. When I think about myself growing up in a Christian home, I was taught, really good virtues and all that stuff. But I don't know, I just feel like classical music gave it to me on a sensory level. And I just kind of intuitively heard, this is what it means to really be a truly good person and follow these virtues. So I've made it my mission just because I feel like not enough people kind of understand why we should listen to classical. It's sort of like this antiquated or like privileged thing where it's like this fancy thing that you dress up for. You go to the symphony on a date with your husband. Or it's like a museum piece, like we're going to study the works of Haydn, and this guy wore a wig, and like it's just it's just unfortunately too often just removed from the home. And I just think like it's important that, as you said, like we fill our homes with these reminders of what it means to be a good person. And I really think classical music can do that in a really powerful way. So I'm all about I love to say, like, I like to bring the hall into people's homes. And the ways I'm doing that is I'm trying to create a lot of free resources just to get the word out there as fast as possible. Um, and then, eventually I'm hoping to create a music listening journal for kids where they can hopefully be doing this on a daily level, but sitting down more often and having prompts to engage their imaginations and to encourage them to articulate a response. So that's my
That's
goal.
awesome.
It's in the works. Right now, I'm just focusing on free resources.
Since the pandemic, we've had kind of this rethinking of how we educate our children in the home and what good resources are out there and what can be created for parents in the home. So when I saw you were doing this, I was like, this is perfect. Like, this is perfect timing. People need this, especially making it so that they can do it in the home. So it doesn't have to come from a music teacher, or maybe it's initiated by the music teacher, but then the teacher is helping the family and the parent learn together. Is that right? kind of.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important that it actually starts with the parent because, as we all know, the ramifications from that are just amazing. Like, if you get the parent excited about classical music, it will become a family affair and it will be a home affair instead of like another assignment for the child. You know, what you don't want it to be is just like, I mean, it might need to start this way, but ideally it's not just a homework assignment, but you're getting the whole house excited and you're filling that house with the beauty and power of classical music.
Yes, I love it so much. So I had another question, and I want to know, as a piano teacher for you, what do you do, or what are some tips you might have for teachers when a student is just straight up not interested in classical, or that's really turning them away from the instrument? Do you have any tips or tricks?
I'm laughing because I have a lot of students that are in that position, and I've been wondering the same thing myself. No, I do have some tips. I just first of all, I make sure that I definitely am doing stuff that they love. So I don't do the whole like, well, I teach classical and you must play this only, and sorry you hate it, but let's just keep going. So I definitely try to find pieces of, well, usually they're songs. I usually, they want to learn a pop song or like a video game theme, which, by the way, it's surprising me how many very cool video game themes are out there. So I try to, in addition to classical music, always have that, especially once they reach like age 10, I try to have it more be like they have their own project that they're really passionate about, and they decide what it's going to be, and I okay it. And then in addition, we have a classical piece. So kind of goes hand in hand, and then they feel like they have, some say in the matter. In terms of how I get them to hopefully love it more, I try to really get inside the minds of both the composer and the child playing the music. So, instead of just like, play that staccato, like, are you playing these articulations? Like, why are the articulations there? What image was the composer trying to create with those articulations? What shapes, emotions, land, all of that. So we try, and then we go into the composition process also theory wise, and I'm always surprised by how the kids do think that's pretty cool. Like, what was the composer doing? Let's look at the chord progression here, and then whoa, change of key. Look, he's going to a whole new area. And I think that theory becomes so alive when you bring it into the piece of music you're working on. So I try to do that, but then ultimately asking the child questions that make them realize they can really make this their own. This can truly become their own piece of music by their interpretation. So just asking them, what stories do you hear? What colors? What emotions? What character do you assign to this piece? Then they really can start to get excited about it. I think
Yes.
ultimately, if the student, if the teacher is excited about it and you convey that, and remembering that speaks so much on its own. Like, the child can sense if the teacher is excited, they will generally, that'll be intoxicating, and they'll catch some of that. And then the other
Mhm.
thing I just want to add though is that I think that there's unfortunately a lot of dry classical music that I would say maybe we shouldn't play anymore. It's just really not that interesting. And just because it's old and in the classical canon doesn't mean you have to teach it. Because I know for myself, I learned some pretty boring pieces, and it seemed like it was just because I needed to learn like a certain technique or something very specific. And I don't think that's necessary. I think we should just assign the really great pieces, the really inspiring, exciting, beautiful, truly great pieces, so that children see like, this is great stuff. This is not just like
Yeah.
classical textbook.
That's such a great point. I'm thinking about the typical 16-year-old who's been taking lessons since they were 8. It's like, how many songs will they really learn? Maybe 30 to 40 really well.
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
they're not learning like books and books and books like someone might do once they get to college or later on in their life. But as a kid, that's such a great point that we really can focus on really good arrangements of songs that we love, that we know might be really fun with different rhythms from a variety of composers with a variety of imagery. And you just kind of bundled up for us a number of things we can do with our students to bring classical music alive. And I just want to tell teachers, like, we should never just be handing them a song, putting a date on it, circling some things, and expecting that student to come back fully practiced. I think that's on us as teachers. That is where we are in fault. If we're going, I don't know why they don't like classical music. Well, hello, they're surrounded by screens and a lot of other music and movies and games that are way more entertaining. And so we need to be more creative. We need to think about how we can connect with the student on their level and talk about things that matter to them in the music and bring it to life, like you've mentioned. One thing I wanted to add to all of the suggestions you gave is demonstration in a variety of ways. And YouTube is just such a great tool, a database of many people playing these classical works. And I would even look up that song and find someone their age playing it at a recital or playing it on stage at in a competition. Even if it's a slightly different arrangement, they're still learning the tune, they're learning the melodies, they're learning how it goes, and they're going, oh my gosh, that 12-year-old is so good. I want to be like him. And I can remember as a teenager, I don't even know that YouTube was around yet.
Yeah, I don't know if
Like,
it was when I was.
I don't know, like 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I don't know. But I can remember listening on iTunes to the music that a teacher had given to me and just listening to it during the week and going, wow, this is really beautiful. This isn't just boring.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned the listening component and also all of the, we have so much at our fingertips right now living in this century with all these brilliant pianists around the world that we have access to. And actually, I have been doing that as well. What you just mentioned is such a good idea in terms of, asking them to listen to different performances by different pianists out there. And I remember I asked a 16-year-old to listen to 4 different pianists playing the same piece and asked her to tell me which were her favorite and why. And she loved that assignment. She could see the slight variations, nuances that each pianist brought to the same work. And it really inspired her. She kind of decided which she wanted to take, which aspects of each performance she wanted to learn from. And listening is a huge component that we could be tapping into. And I think I don't know. I mean, I think we sometimes want to apologize for assigning too much, but assigning listening is a really fun, easy assignment that'll bring so much life to their playing.
Yes, and teachers shouldn't be scared to bring it into the lesson either. Sometimes we need to use lesson time to scroll through YouTube and just watch 20 seconds of some different videos to show
Yeah.
them, because sometimes kids won't do it, and that's okay. I don't think we need to be hard on them about it, but demonstrating it for them with them. I want to hear about your resources. First, I want to hear about the resources you have that teachers can send to the parents of their students. So what's your website and what are the resources that they can be using for their lessons?
Yeah, so my website's just my name.com, so it's sadiehoyt.com. And on the free resources page, my website is still fairly recent, but I made sure it came with my first free resource, which is a really pretty printout that the parents can print out for home use. It's listening charts. It's called 30 Days of Classical Encounters. So the idea is 1 classical encounter per day for a month, and it's divided into 5 weeks. So each week gets 6 tracks, and there are barcodes for Apple Music and Spotify for each track. There's a way for them to rate each track so they can really personalize it, decide which ones are their favorites. It tells them the date that it was written, the country of origin, of course, the composer's name, and it provides a timeline. So it's just a way it's like an aesthetically pleasing and practical way to start to introduce classical more regularly into the home. And I think just visually seeing it helps a lot.
Yes.
There's that, and teachers can, for sure, I would say it'd be awesome to start spreading that to families. Then the whole family gets involved, like we said earlier. And then the resource that's going to be coming out, I believe, in time for this podcast release is going to be a child-focused one. So it actually goes hand in hand with the resource I just mentioned. So you can pair it with that, and when you turn on those orchestral tracks, and by the way, it's 30 days of orchestral masterpieces. I forgot to mention that. So my idea is to eventually do all the subgenres of classical music, but I thought, of course, I'd start out with a bang with the orchestral masterpieces. So the second resource is going to be a printout that the child can complete while those tracks are being played. And it comes with a musical timeline of all the eras of music, and it asks them to shade in the timeline that the composer belongs to. And then it asks them about 5 different questions that just help them articulate a response to the music. And I think maybe a way to talk to parents about this too is talking about how this will also just help them. It'll help them engage their imaginations. It'll also help them be able to articulate a response. And I provide an adjectives glossary on the page so that the child is using really good descriptive words when they're listening to this music, and hopefully, learn the art of articulation as well. So yeah, this resource will be out soon. I'm hoping a lot of families will start tapping into it and start having their kids listen to more classical on a regular basis.
Oh, it's so good. As I'm hearing it again, I'm going, I actually did look at them and I want to use it for my 4-year-old and I'm my 4 and 3-year-old. And I think this is such a great way, as a parent, I'm thinking, I love music so much. And it's been interesting as I've been raising these tiny people, like it's not easy. So
Yeah,
just like,
sure.
I thought, oh, they're going to love the piano. I'm going to do like these weekly classes with them for like music and movement, and they're going to love the classics. Like I have all of these hopes and dreams and goals. And I think more than anything, it's time, and it's finding good resource. It really is. It's finding good resources that I feel like resonate with me as a musician that I know my kids will love. So, I'm really, really excited about it. And I also wanted to mention to teachers, this is a kind of a fun way you could actually use your 30 days of listening or 30 days of encounters, musical encounters, could be really great for social media. It could be a great opportunity for teachers to say, for the next 30 days, I'm doing these 30 classics, orchestral classics. And how fun would that be? It's already a curated list of works that they could tap into. So just another thought on how they could use that resource. They could even do it with their studio all at once through social
That's
media.
a great idea. I love that. Yeah, my whole thing is I know I've talked to mothers many times about this, and I've heard the struggle is real with time management in the home. I mean, the kids have so much they're supposed to be doing for homework and for piano practice and all of their extracurriculars and everything. And my goal is to make
Yeah.
these resources as easy, as simple as possible to use. And so I can't wait to hear your feedback, Carly. I'm hoping you can test it out on your kids and let me know. It's
Yes, I
easy.
will. I definitely
Yeah.
will. I even also had this thought, and maybe this could be something you could look at creating down the road when you have extra time, which we don't
Right.
have. But,
Yeah.
as you've been talking about imagery, I've thought I want to get online and print out some like imagery to put on the fridge with these songs to be like, okay, today we're listening to, even if it's just like the song that sounds like horses, or the song that sounds like a circus, or the song that sounds like waves in the ocean, because that's how my kids remember things, is they remember it with like accompanied by some kind of an image or a story, or it's accompanied with some literature or some kids books that a lot of these classics have books that sing the song or go with them. So I'm already kind of thinking I can do this. I can
Yeah.
find ways to introduce the classics. And my goal would be, we're driving to grandma's house and they say, can we turn on some Mozart? Like,
I
let's listen
know,
to
right? Wouldn't
Beethoven.
that be a dream?
Actually, my
Yeah.
sister or my brother and his wife, their kids, that's them. Like
Oh, wow.
they prefer like listening to books in the car and classical music, and their oldest is only 9. So
Oh,
they're on their way. Like she raises them to read and to listen. And I thought she's just such a great example to me of like,
wow.
you can do it. It really does take being intentional and not just letting the world happen to our family. Because if you let that happen, like there's no way they're just going to suddenly be interested in the ballet and in playing violin and all these really wonderful good things. We have to create a plan and actually do it. I'm motivating myself right now.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's so good to hear from a parent about all the struggles. Oh man, I'm just hypothetically creating these, but I'm testing it out with real parents. So I'm getting feedback and I'm trying to make this an actually doable thing in the home. And I think what you
Yeah.
said earlier about connecting dots is such a great idea. And eventually it would be really cool to create more resources that tie it together with images, like you said, or like, look at the country that the composer is from, what was happening in the world of Mozart, stuff like that. Because that'll really, as you said, that'll really stick with the child. But I will say, I did teach at a school, this is a long time ago, but I taught K through 5, I believe it was. And one of the coolest things I did with them, or just one of the coolest things that I saw happen, I should say, is that I just asked them to create a story they thought, or assign a title to the piece they were listening to. Like, what do you think the composer was writing about when he wrote this? Or, if you were in charge of creating a title for this piece, what would it be? And they got so excited about that. And then, we did the big reveal at the end. So, it would be like
Fun.
Smetana's Moldau. Like, they would listen to that piece, and it's about, a river running from the mountain to the ocean. But they didn't know that. But just hearing all the different ideas for what this piece was about, then you talk to the kids about, isn't that cool? This is what music can be. It can be a different story inside the heads of everyone here. But then when they hear what it is, they're like, oh, that's awesome. I hear that too, you know?
Oh,
So
I
it's
love it.
cool. Yeah.
There are endless possibilities when we start thinking about it and planning in our minds what could work for our own children, for our own students. And teachers have this ability to mentor kids, and they will think about those moments for the rest of their lives. I often think about my mentors and teachers that introduced some of my favorite composers to me, or simply played some pieces for me that maybe I didn't end up learning, but just watching them play something that I know is really hard or took a long time to learn, like how encouraging that was to just witness that. I think that's one of the huge benefits of, we could do another podcast episode on this, but of going to going to a live orchestra is you're just in this room where in this moment, like this, I won't relive this again. This isn't being like the acoustic experience, and watching these musicians on their instruments working together harmoniously. Like there's just so much benefit to introducing that to our kids. And I am cheerleading and rooting for music teachers everywhere to keep it around in ways that are creative. Like you said, maybe we do both. We do pop and classical. That's, by the way, I do the same thing. I've always done that, like, because we need to compromise. I think we need to compromise with our kids, unless they love. I do have one student who loves classical music, and it's always such a treat, right? When we get that,
Yeah. I
that
have one
one's,
student who doesn't want to do anything else. It's amazing.
yeah. Okay, we could keep talking, but I want to hear what's your website, your social media, so teachers can connect with you further.
Okay, yeah. So my website is sadiehoyt.com. If you're looking for free resources, it's sadiehoyt.com/free resources, I believe. But it's easy to get there if you just click on the educator tab on my website. And then my social media links are facebook.com/sadiehoyt music. Sorry, yeah. So facebook.com/sadiehoyt music. And then my Instagram handle is, instagram.com/sadiehoyt.
Perfect. One more question before we go, because this is an online teaching podcast. I want to know, how was your transition to teaching online during the pandemic? Are you fully teaching online now? Is it a hybrid? What's your experience been?
Yeah, so it was a funny experience. I will say, for one, I wasn't completely new. I used to live out in Portland, Oregon area, and then I moved from Portland, Oregon to DC to actually get my master's in music. And when I moved, I had to say goodbye to about 30 students, a full studio, and it was incredibly sad. As we all know, we built up studios, and just leaving behind is terrible. So I ended up keeping actually a family from the West Coast online. They contacted me a year after I had moved and said they missed me, which was such an honor to hear, and they wanted to take from me online. So I gave it a try before COVID, and so I'd already had a little bit of experience with it, but I wasn't totally set up for it. It wasn't really, I didn't have the right organization for it and stuff. So it was definitely a huge challenge at first, because I was also living in a cramped space with two other girls on Capitol Hill during 2020, by the way. 2020 in DC was quite eventful. So it was really cramped and claustrophobic, and I was on Zoom, and I was really going crazy, I'm going to be honest, for the first year, basically, or 9 months. But within those 9 months also, I was growing a lot, and I was actually, I found you during that time. I was finding online groups, and it was so wonderful to just know there's this huge support network out there of people doing this worldwide who have already been doing this. So I started doing research and looking up ways to improve it, and gradually over, a span of, I would say, about a year, I just learned all the ways to make it better. I started using Musicology, which is so much better than Zoom, and looking up a lot more resources. So yeah, I'm still actually fully online. It's crazy. I moved from DC back home to Ohio, where I'm from, And I was honest with my students about what I was doing. I said I wanted to be closer to my family and I wasn't sure if I'd come back. This might be indefinite. And I didn't know
Yeah.
if they'd leave me or not, but I tried to really talk up, I've listened to your podcast about group classes and about adding value to your online studio. And I really tried to, during 2020, introduce extra workshops like in composition. We did a lot of extra stuff. And so when I moved
Good.
home, I tried to build up the whole online studio. We're going to have a thriving online studio with, options for your child to play for their peers and connect with young pianists around the world. And I switched to
It's
a
great.
membership price. So it's not just, the parent isn't just thinking about what price they're paying for each lesson, but it's like you're part of Sadie's studio. You get access to all these benefits. And it's been really a dream, honestly. I can't believe that I was able to move home and keep all 30 of my students. It's crazy. I mean, COVID is
Oh,
a
I
terrible
love
thing,
it.
but also, it's really helped us transition to a whole new way of living and working.
Yes, and the creativity that comes from hard situations is always amazing and can be life changing. I've watched teachers who claim to be like the most tech inefficient people on the planet who are now like multiple cameras and microphones and editing videos for students, and they love it. They really love the ability to create a multimedia experience for their students versus sitting next to them on a bench, which again will never go away, is a wonderful way of teaching. But there is so much potential and possibility with online teaching. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Sadie. Such a pleasure to chat with you today.
Yeah, so wonderful to chat with you too. Thanks for having me.